Ready to start a new experience unlike any other? Getting started in pilot training can be thrilling and may also feel like wandering into a process that's not so simple. But it doesn't have to be that way. So if you're looking to get some clarity on getting started, this video aims to help you out with those first steps. In this video, I will be referring to all the points that will be listed in a PDF worksheet you can use for your own use as well. The PDF download will be available on the Idle Concepts website at idleconcepts.com. The link to the webpage will be in the description box below. My decision to become a pilot began when I was a senior in high school, and it was a very last minute and very unexpected decision too. So I will share with you everything I did wrong or learned the hard way so you can have a much easier beginning to your pilot journey. Being my 18-year-old self, I wanted to do what everyone else in my class seemed to be doing, go to college and get a degree. I was weak under the pressure of being asked what college I will attend, what major I will pursue. You know how that all goes. So you can imagine I had little understanding of the aviation industry I was about to get myself into. No matter what age and no matter where you are in life, finding a flight school for pilot training begins with what kind of school you will be attending. The first step is to understand your two options for flight school structures. They are called Part 61 schools and Part 141 schools. So by going to college, I slipped into a Part 141 school, which is a structure typical for most universities. Part 141 schools are identified as certificated schools by the Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA for short. To summarize Part 141 schools as simple as possible, it means that the school applied and got approval from the FAA with their training programs, which will be organized and held up to a standard established by the FAA. This includes their syllabus, which will be strictly followed. Because of this qualification with the FAA, students would be able to have fewer flight hours required to qualify for a pilot certificate, compared to those who train with Part 61 schools. For example, the requirement for a private pilot certificate is 40 hours with a Part 61 school, and 35 hours in a Part 141 school. However, I do not think the fewer hour requirement with a Part 141 school is a strong advantage, since the national average for students to be ready to get their private pilot certificate is between 60 to 75 hours or even more. The length of pilot training depends on a few factors, but the most significant factor is the student and the time the student needs in order to reach a specific level of flying skill and knowledge. These levels of flying skills and knowledge are written out in the Airman Certification Standards, which is abbreviated to ACS, which both types of schools will train their students up to these standards to be ready to take their practical exam. If you would like to have a look at the ACS for yourself, a free PDF is available on the FAA website at faa.gov. In Part 61 schools, they are also inspected and have rules established with the FAA. It's not like these schools are wildly out of control with no rules, but just understand it is not to the extent as Part 141 schools. These schools are allowed more flexibility in the training they offer, and their chosen syllabus can be used as a guide to determine how each student's needs or situations are best suited for their learning. These schools will also conduct their lessons to build the students' skills and learning according to the contents in the Airman Certification Standards. So I ultimately dropped out of the Part 141 training program and switched to a Part 61 school to finish my training. Personally, the Part 61 school suited my needs much better, and this is where I kinda wish I had known about this option before I graduated high school, but it's too late to cry about that now. Here is why I found myself liking the Part 61 way of training. Starting with their flexibility in training, I experienced overall quicker progress. With flight training, we're dependent on some factors that are beyond our control, especially with weather, aircraft being unavailable for maintenance, instructor being unavailable, etc. And because pilot training involves a high amount of motor skills, learning the maneuvers, and also a lot of information to learn, it's important to stay consistent and regularly be active in the learning. The more frequently you train, the better. My experience at the Part 141 school, I was stuck on the lesson on practicing landings, but for multiple weeks the local weather was far too windy. That caused many cancellations. When we had to stick with the training syllabus and the order of each lesson as they are completed, I was very stagnant in my training for almost 2 months. Let's take a Part 61 example scenario. The day a flight lesson is scheduled, the cloud layer is too low to adequately practice ground reference maneuvers. That could be an opportunity to introduce the student to instrument flying skills inside low visibility conditions, which this understanding is included in the private pilot training requirements. In some cases, the order of each lesson topic is not always so important, as long as the student is at a point in their training where skipping a few topics in a standard syllabus would not disrupt or confuse their flow of learning. Ultimately, by the time the student is ready for their practical exam, they would need to demonstrate proficiency in all applicable areas in the ACS, no matter what order they learned them. And since with less time and training usually equates to less cost as well. And because I was paying a higher price at the 141 school, I imagined that my pilot license would maybe look different or somehow hold a higher value, like how a university degree indicates the name of the university. But I was wrong. Whether you get your license through training at a Part 61 or 141, your card will have the same private pilot title and qualifications. No difference. With this, I do not want to sway you into a direction that may not work for you, as this is just my own experience. I know a few people that really succeeded with what they wanted in a Part 141 school and enjoyed their program structures, but do consider the differences between the two types of schools and find which one will best suit you in achieving your own goals. There is a popular yet kind of inaccurate idea about Part 141 schools being better in quality and reliability, which I believe is not always the case. From my experience, I've seen the quality of a flight school is not determined by the form it takes, whether it's Part 61 or 141. I've seen sketchy Part 141 schools and Part 61 schools serving excellent quality training, and vice versa as well. But do not let the flight school structure alone be a determining factor for your decisions in selecting your school for you. It's like buying things on Craigslist. Some purchases are amazing awesome, while other experiences on there, you just feel lucky to get out alive. Now that you know the types of schools you'll be choosing from, let's look at why commuting time can be helpful to consider. I include this point when planning on picking your flight school because of the nature of flying itself. Be aware that lessons can get repeatedly canceled or delayed due to unpredictable weather or last-minute maintenance needed on an aircraft. I found it to be helpful to have a plan B for these types of scenarios. You may find yourself on occasions waiting at the airport for some time, so be open to alternatives so this does not end up becoming frustrating. A shorter commute time is always more convenient, and it can also open up more last-minute opportunities if weather quickly improves, for example. Sometimes we just have to be open to being spontaneous with flying. Now we're going to talk about the star of the show. Choosing your aircraft depends on your own goals and budget for training. Common aircraft used in training have a single engine, fixed landing gear for simplicity, and can have basic or advanced cockpits. Usually, the larger the engine size, year of the model, cockpit systems as well as the systems of the aircraft will be determining factors in the hourly rate of the aircraft. When it comes to comparing the cockpit features, you may hear the word glass cockpit, steam gauge, or six-pack. A glass cockpit is essentially the cool-looking ones with computer screens that display information, while the steam gauge or six-pack description refers to cockpits that have the analog displays. Most students choose the most economical aircraft to do their training, and often this is the most recommended way to go, as it is usually easier to upgrade to more complex and faster aircraft. So for example, training in the analog six-pack gauges and then transitioning to a glass cockpit after getting my pilot's license would have been much more smooth. But since I experienced the reverse, I felt like I was looking all over the place with the gauges. But with practice, of course anything's possible. And compared to driving a car, aircraft cockpits are more tight and make people feel cramped. But this is normal and most people get used to the new environment. So if a flight school has more than one kind of training aircraft, it may be worth checking them out and see which one feels right for you. When it comes to rates, this is going to be the largest focus when it comes to estimating your expenses in flight training. The billing for aircraft rental is almost always calculated by each tenth of an hour used as the engine is operating. This is recorded by a small meter linked to the aircraft engine called the Hobbs meter. You will find it in the cockpit of each aircraft. Notice how on the worksheet it also includes wet or dry rate. Pay attention to whether an aircraft rental rate is displayed as wet or dry rate. Wet rate is the price per hour that includes aircraft rental time, the fuel, oil, and/or insurance if the school decides to include that in too. A dry rate would cause you to have to include additional cost of fuel usage to the dry rate price displayed, so don't be fooled by a seemingly low price indicated. It might possibly be a dry rate. Here it may be worth observing how available a flight school's aircraft is for you. If there are a lot of other students or licensed renters competing with you for a particular aircraft, it may be worth noting while planning your schedule for lessons. It may be a good idea for you to try scheduling multiple lessons in advance to minimize those long gaps in between your flights. Since not all flight schools are uniform in their billing systems, it's worth asking if there are any additional forms of fees or possible charges. Also, don't forget to ask if there are any discount programs. Some schools agree to a lower aircraft rental rate if customers make a deposit of a certain amount to their accounts with a flight school. So just ask and see what you can get. Of course, we all want to know if the aircraft we will be flying is in best possible condition and safe, and will stay that way too. Though just by looking at it, it's not always so easy to tell right away exactly how the aircraft conditions are, but don't miss out on the opportunity to use some visual clues. You don't have to be a mechanic to see if something just looks a bit unusual. Some basic and quick observations include if there's any signs of engine oil leaking, which are often in areas towards the bottom of the aircraft. Your sense of smell can also come in handy when determining if there may be any leaks in fuel or even burning oil. And even more obvious, does the aircraft look overall neglected? Garbage left behind from previous users, faded checklists in poor conditions? Are the tires so smooth that they have no tread left on them? And though a lot of training aircraft can range from a few years old to multiple decades old, they can have a well-maintained or completely overhauled engine running inside them. And I eventually learned that the maintenance requirements for aircraft are far more stringent than cars. To me, this was encouraging news. The important part about the observations here is that we care more about the functionality and reliability of the aircraft and its systems, not so much the cosmetic aspects of it. Chipping paint off a 30-year-old aircraft is typical. A brand new shiny airplane, but with a puddle of oil underneath it, is not so welcoming. Another point I included here is to get an idea of where the flight school gets its maintenance work done. If maintenance is done on site, there's higher chances of fixes being completed in a shorter amount of time. I once saw a flight school that conducted its training several miles away from their maintenance site, almost 50 miles away. So even for minor fixes, the affected aircraft was off the schedule for extended periods of time. But I think that was more of a rare kind of situation. Now we come to the rates of instruction, or the price of using the services of a flight instructor. Their rates are somewhere between $30 to $60 per hour on average. Much like the aircraft billing strategies, instructor billing time is estimated by each tenth of an hour used in your lessons with the instructor. This applies to both on the ground, like in a classroom setting, or in flight in the aircraft cockpit. Almost all flight instruction is done on a one-on-one basis, just you and the instructor. Don't entirely teach yourself how to fly, but I recommend use the available sources so not only your learning progress will improve, but also help save more money on the larger expenses for renting the aircraft for your training. The textbooks, especially those published by the FAA, are written in a very reader-friendly way. I didn't mean to rhyme there. but with those books, anyone without a background in aviation can understand and follow. I was once disappointed when I was being billed for having an instructor just read the textbook to me. That's not a good use of time or money. Flight schools can be found in all kinds of airports, including remote ones where there is simply a small strip of land used for a runway, to larger, busy airports with a control tower. Understand that a small airport can provide a more relaxed training pace when maneuvering and navigating in these areas, while a large, busy airport with a control tower can be intimidating and add some extra pressure, but provide great exposure to piloting skills as well. Depending on the class of airspace the airport is included in, the operations will vary. A good balance would be ideal, but since learning to fly includes navigating to and from different airports, the opportunity to gain exposure to all kinds of situations will be available. After becoming licensed, the private pilot can take off and land at almost any airport in the United States. Of course, there are a few certain airports with restrictions, but that detailed explanation will be excessive for this video. No matter where training takes place, the lessons will be so that the tasks will gradually be transferred to the new student until the student is ready to be fully competent in handling the operations. It can be more convenient if a flight school provides an online account to keep track of your billing and schedule of lessons, but this is not necessary. When last-minute updates and changes need to be made to schedules, this feature is nice to have. Also, keeping track of your account, if you made a deposit for example, is also important. After all, people do make mistakes once in a while. Get yourself a good instructor. Key things I would look for is their teaching method, punctuality, attitude, and schedule availability. Different teaching methods work best with different students, so I recommend one who understands how you learn best, whether this is visual, hands-on, detail-oriented, etc. If someone can take a rather complex subject and explain it in such simple terms to where a child could understand, this is a good sign you will be able to tackle the more complex subjects successfully together in the future. With punctuality, this is a given. I don't want to ramble on this one. I'll ramble on the others instead. How about attitude? With this one, I want to emphasize that even during those seemingly dragging times, the instructor can help maintain willingness in the student to carry on until the practice makes perfect. Almost everyone, and I mean everyone, goes through a phase or two where it can feel like learning to fly is a tough challenge. Instructors are also needed as a pilot mentor to the student, and even though flight instructing also has its own set of challenges, a bitter instructor can be very detrimental to a student's learning and make the end goal feel just a bit further out of reach. A friendly and approachable demeanor would be a positive impression to look for when meeting your potential flight instructors. After all, you will likely be sitting shoulder to shoulder in an airplane cockpit multiple times. Ask your potential flight instructors about their availability for lessons. There may be some great instructors at a flight school, but only working part-time or just so booked up that getting a lesson with them is a challenge. This factor may be just as important as their personality and professionalism. And if the flight school has a range of aircraft make and models, just make sure the instructor also teaches in the particular aircraft you are interested in training in. Each airplane can be unique in various ways. When you find an instructor you fit well with, stick with them if you can. He or she will have an understanding of your flying strengths and areas that would need more practice. Switching may cause you to need to reintroduce yourself and spend time reviewing the same items in training so the new instructor can get an understanding of where you are at in training and how to move forward from there. But instructors themselves may come and go. Some may move on to other careers such as the airlines. It's not the end of the world if you need to change instructors, but also if you start training with an instructor and just not satisfied, there is no regulation out there preventing you from changing to a new instructor. After all, you're not marrying them. And same goes for flight schools as well. If you have started logging flight training at a particular flight school and find that it's just not a fit for you, you can go on to a different flight school and start from there. It's commitment free. as long as they didn't get you to sign any strange contracts that would prevent you from doing so. Don't be intimidated about changing flight schools, as it's very often a very simple process, a matter of just signing up at a new one. Sadly, I've seen a few students begin training and didn't get along with their first instructors or was disappointed from a school, and had that experience ruin their whole impression of flight training and becoming a pilot. So please, if you ever find yourself in this situation, don't let one person or business lead you into thinking that flying is no fun. The flight hours in your logbook never expire no matter where you go in the country or how many flight schools you have logged hours at. If you change flight schools and they have a different fleet of training aircraft available, just be prepared to adjusting to those changes. After having visited a flight school in your area, how do you feel? Don't neglect your gut feeling on this. If it was a positive experience, ask to schedule an introductory flight lesson. This kind of flight is offered at most flight schools to get a taste of the experience. So go ahead and put it down on your schedule and go have fun. At the very bottom of the worksheet, I wanted to include a small section about the minimal suggested study materials. I included this part because one last mistake I want to include in here is that as a new student, I fell into the trap of buying a student pilot kit at my first flight school. They told me to buy it, so I didn't know any better. It was full of books I didn't use, overpriced headset, and even more useless stuff. Okay, before my monotone voice changes to rage. But back to my little list here. The good news is that most of these quality textbooks are available in PDF for free, since they are publications from the FAA. Or if you decide to purchase them in print, they are also very affordable, well, at least compared to those college textbooks. They are between $20 to $30 a piece, and trust me, you will use these books for your training. As far as the aviation headset, like I included in my list there, most flight schools offer to rent their headsets at a generally affordable price. But as soon as you have tried a few flight lessons and feel even more confident that this is what you want to continue, it's not bad to get your own. So buy stuff slowly, unlike me, and buy them as you need them, as flight training is just one of those activities that tends to have a ton of gadgets and just stuff marketed so much to make it seem like you need everything. And I think at this point I should wrap it up. Can you believe I seriously thought this video was going to be about 10 minutes long? I really did. I hope this helped you grow motivated to go out there and start exploring the options to help you get you on your way to becoming a pilot. And thank you so much for watching. And I'm curious how you decided to pursue aviation. Please comment below. What's your story?